Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutt of HurricaneTrack.com here. This is the first of the off-season editions of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion, and we're just going to drop the hurricane part going forward from here until May, unless we have a hurricane to talk about. It's just the outlook and discussion, the winter version, or the off-season version more accurately, even though today is the beginning of meteorological winter, and that's just a scientific term. The calendar says winter later in the month of December, but this is the new logo we have right there, produced by a good friend of the project. His name is Tim, and the graphic in the background, that thumbnail, is produced by another good friend of ours over from the UK, Kari. We got a great team here, and we're going to be moving forward in the off season, and we're going to be doing a lot. You know, it doesn't just go away after November 30th. The HurricaneTrack brand is going to stick around, and we've got a lot of off-season projects, a lot of education work, podcast series that I'm working on, the new series, the Hurricane Highway, finishing up some stuff from the first season, going to be starting on the second season, and then in all the interim, we will have some winter storms to track, like that background picture there. That's from a lake effect event back in late February of this year up in western New York. And you'll see lots of different pictures of different events as we do backgrounds like this. Usually this update, excuse me, will be once a week, the dry air getting to me. It is. We got some dry air, cold front move through. It's chilly now. Got the hoodie on. But we'll have a new update, the HurricaneTrack off-season update, at least once a week. Usually every Monday. I'm doing this one on a Tuesday because it's the first day of December, and it is fitting. All right, so I talked about this yesterday, but just a real quick recap of our plans heading into next year, what we're going to be doing, why we're going to be active in the off-season. I mean, the most obvious thing is that in the off-season, there's a lot of work to do. We got East Coast winter storms to keep track of, those bomb cyclones, maybe get a big East Coast blizzard, anywhere from the North Carolina Outer Banks up through coastal New Jersey, Long Island maybe, and my favorite, I got to be honest with you, are the ones up in eastern Massachusetts, Situate, and down to the Cape, and that vicinity. That's my favorite area for these big-time blizzards. And then lake effect snow. I got hooked on that, like I mentioned, last February into very early March, and there's some lake effect snow going on today. I just couldn't be there for it. I'm actually hoping to wait until January because I got a lot of work to do the rest of this month to catch up on some things. But then high plains blizzards out in the high plains. Probably Nebraska, the Dakotas, maybe Kansas, maybe even Oklahoma. That's not really the high plains there, more the central plains, but you get the idea. And on this one right here, we're going to get a little bit of a head start because I'm sending a few of our remote camera systems to our good friend Derek Thompson in South Dakota, and he'll be able to put those out even before we get a real big event that I will be heading out there for, at least hopefully. So those are the three types of storm systems that we're kind of looking forward to, if you will, for winter weather. And then once we get into next year, I'm really hoping that the conferences can make a comeback. Lots of positive news on the COVID vaccine, and hopefully that comes to pass, and we can get past this pandemic, and conferences can resume, especially the National Tropical Weather Conference, a fantastic small conference down in South Padre Island. I'm looking forward to that. Usually it's in April. And then really going to be focusing on this bullet point right here. Later on, we'll move, down the road, a one-time May severe weather event where we pick the right day, and we'll look at the pattern and we'll go as needed. We'll go on demand, as they say. And this is going to be really big. That'll be our sort of climax of the off-season coverage as we test a whole bunch of equipment for next year's hurricane season and study some stuff on the plains, try to contribute to the science a little bit out there. Never wanted to get into tornado chasing unless I could do something for the greater good. I want to be able to contribute something back and not just be somebody in the way, especially since there's thousands of chasers out there now. All right, even though it's not hurricane season anymore on a calendar, that doesn't mean that the Atlantic can't produce tropical cyclones or subtropical cyclones. The likelihood that we see anything developing down in the deep tropics through this area is generally pretty low in the off season. It can happen, but it's pretty rare. Instead, we're going to be looking for little features like that, which doesn't have much convection with it. This very large, sprawling, non-tropical low up here in the northeast Atlantic, we'll watch for features like those, and maybe one of those works their way through the atmosphere in a configuration that allows them to develop more convection. That's thunderstorm activity, and they get a name. Now this is interesting down here in the Caribbean, and we'll watch and see if this tries to develop a little bit more. Not seeing too much signal in the modeling. There's a strong cold front that came through. Here's the upper level energy over here, surface low, and the wind coming around that, cold air, advection. That's air that's moving horizontally, advection versus convection. Convection is vertical. So, we're in the meteorological winter. A lot of colder, drier air moving down into the lower 48, off the continent, and even making its way, this cooler, drier air, through the peninsula of Florida, even down into the Yucatan Channel, into the Caribbean. It's December. That's what's supposed to happen. All right, so one of the key things that we will be watching in the off-season is this graphic, the sea surface temperature anomalies. It's one thing when you look at sea surface temperatures, the actual temperatures, and we'll look at those from time to time, but what are the anomalies, the departures from the long-term average? And this is a key to what's happening currently and what's happening or what should happen in the future. And this is a big, big player going forward. So we're going to watch this, at least like I said, once a week. And the biggest aspect of this that I want to be keeping an eye on, of course, is this La Nina pattern in the tropical Pacific. The abnormal cooling of the equatorial Pacific and all that that implies, this La Nina, which is firmly in place. And then on the flip side, the Atlantic Basin over here, the main development region, the subtropical Atlantic up here, the Gulf, the Caribbean, everything in between. And as you can clearly see, put a big plus sign in the Atlantic and a negative sign in the Pacific. The Atlantic's warmer than average, the Pacific, at least down here in the tropical Pacific, colder than average for now. And so the big, question mark is, does this persist through the winter, which it looks like it will, and then more importantly for next year's hurricane season, into the spring, summer, and maybe even the fall. This will be a huge, huge driver right here. What happens with this? And the biggest thing is, do we go to El Nino or warmer equatorial temperatures, maybe even warm neutral? Doesn't even have to be classified technically an El Nino, which is the opposite of what we see right there. That's the key right there. El Nino, you usually get a suppressed Atlantic hurricane season. Less overall numbers, from named storms down to hurricanes. Like, you think about 2006 was pretty much a down year. 2015 was kind of a down year in the Atlantic. Those were El Nino years. That's going to be the key, I think, going forward. And I mean, it's true. And I'm sure Dr. Klotzbach and his team, other entities out there, we will all be following that, and we will tap into different people on social media that I've mentioned before, Eric Webb, Jack Sillen, Tyler Stanfield, and others, Levi Cowan. We'll see what they're thinking as we monitor that in the off season. Another way to do all of this is through charts and graphs. Maps are great. I love maps. I'm a geographer. But the charting of it, looking at things from a graphical perspective like this, a visualization, we notice, in this case, the main development region, and that is the area of the tropical Atlantic between 85 west and 20 west on the longitude side, and between 10 and 20 north on the latitude side. And currently, we are about 1/3 of a degree Celsius. These numbers are in Celsius above the long-term average. You can see way back at the end of September, we hit a peak there of more than 0.8. And that was really significant. And then it dropped off a little bit. It's come back up, dropped off a little bit. Now it's kind of steady. This is also a big clue as to what we could expect for next season. If we see this number dip into negative territory, especially if it's significantly negative, if it stays consistently positive, I don't know. We'll see. There's forecasts and different ensemble plumes and all this other stuff you can watch. But, man, that'll drive you crazy. Let's just look out the window sometimes, see what's happening right now. And this is as close to right now as you can get, updated December 1st. The same thing for the 3.4 index of the El Nino region out in the tropical Pacific. Right now, I mean, really, that's amazing. Look at that. Minus 1.3. That is really, I mean, good grief. I mean, here's neutral or zero, right? And we're down here. It's just been down and fairly steady, but overall the angle is down. And we're at minus 1.3. A pretty significant La Nina in the ENSO region out here, and specifically where this is. Roughly speaking, that's this region right out through here in a rough area. If you sample this, the average surface temperature, according to the CDAS data here, which is just a specific method for capturing data, minus 1.3. Another way to watch this, and we'll do this as well if you've been watching my videos for the past several years, you know what a fan of the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, I am. That is the difference between the pressure in Tahiti, way out in the Southwest Pacific, and Darwin in Australia. And the easiest way to look at this, when these numbers, it's just an index. It doesn't mean anything. It's like the stock market. It's not, it's just an index. That's all it is. It's a score. When it's positive and consistently positive, like we're seeing here, the 30-day average as of today is 8.99. The 90-day average is positive 7. And then the contributor for today, by taking the measurements from Darwin and Tahiti, a whopping plus 21. And we can go look at the trends over here. September came in at plus 9. October, we lost a little bit of ground. It looked like, oh, maybe the SOI is going to go down some. And then we gained it back, and we're at 9.24 for the month of November. And you can see it charted here in the visualization format. Very nice tool to watch. And the key here, as long as this stays generally positive and not significantly negative, that helps to drive the pressure pattern out here that creates strong easterly winds that come from the east, because the pressures are lower over way out in the western Pacific, higher in the eastern Pacific, and so the net flow of air is towards that lower pressure. That's an oversimplification of it, but that is what the SOI generally tells me, and this is a good, and pardon the pun, barometer of what to look for when watching the state of the ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So we will revisit this weekly as well. The other graphic is the subsurface. So you can go look at this map. This is the surface, and if you took a slice right through here, kind of like a CAT scan would be, this is what that would look like. And so this is the surface up here at the top, of course, and then 450 meters deep at the bottom. This is the eastern side of the Pacific. This is the western side over here. And it's a virtual slice through using different data methodologies. And look at the vast, massive area of cold subsurface Pacific water relative to average. And yes, some of it's actually cold. Way below in the western Pacific is the warm pool. This is omnipresent. It's always there, usually. But the strong easterly winds that we have going across, creating these upwelling events where the cold water is able to make it to the surface, keeps this thing in check, way over in the western Pacific. This is something that we can watch in the off season as well. Every week or so we'll check in on this, and we'll just see, because this tells me the future. If you see one of these pools of warm water heading over into the eastern Pacific, what we call an upwelling warm Kelvin wave, one of these blobs of water is able to move, sort of the conveyor belt breaks basically. If this easterly flow over here breaks down, then you get an upwelling Kelvin wave of warm water heading this way, then you start to flip the pattern. So we'll be able to watch this as well in the off season. And all of these things drive, and other factors as well, the winter storm pattern. And this is what we will be looking for in the off season, among other things, the different types of winter storms. You got the Miller A, and this is a great graphic where the low pressure develops out over the Gulf. scoots up the east coast of the United States, and you get these big nor'easters with the snow generally just away from the big cities of the coast, right down the spine of the Appalachians, up into Maine, and maybe severe weather on the warm side of it to begin with. And this is one of the ways you get these nor'easters. The other way, the Miller B, where the clipper system, if you will, we call them Alberta clippers. They come out of Alberta, Canada, in vicinity. These little disturbances ride down the jet stream, but they don't cut across or originate from the Gulf of Mexico. And you get the upper level energy that comes through from Missouri, through Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and then it kind of loses its entity and its energy, creates a secondary low in the lee of the mountains, usually close to the coast. That moves up, and sometimes, depending on where that low tracks, if it's just a little bit more offshore, you get these major snowstorms right down to the coastline, and these two different types of tracks. And these are not etched in stone, like this is exactly what happens, but they are pretty good indicators of what we will be looking for in the modeling going forward. Do we get a clipper system coming out and cutting up the coast like this, or is it more of the southern stream system where you get an active Gulf and then you get the Arctic front coming in, the two combine, and bam, you get this big winter storm along the east coast. Yeah, that's what we'll be watching for sure. And to do that, at least one of the tools, we'll be watching the satellite here, the lower 48, and we do have a front that came through. I mentioned that already. There's the trailing cold front there, the upper level low, and a little subtropical system offshore. Dry, very clear out west. I think the pattern is going to basically be stuck like this, where we have a big ridge sitting out west, troughing over here in the east for the time being, and as such it'll be kind of chilly in the east and maybe a little bit stormy. Some of these clouds that you see, these lake effect bands coming down, some of them, you get this northwest flow snow in the Appalachians. We saw some snow in areas of North Carolina up through Virginia and West Virginia, and even some heavy lake effect snows coming off the lakes there, and that's a whole different animal, lake effect snow, in Ohio today. So we'll be watching all of that. And the lake effect machine is a very complex system. And one thing to mention about that, I will be bringing different experts on. I mean, I know a little bit about winter weather, but I don't know everything. And so, as I do with hurricanes, I like to bring in people that can help to expand our universe of knowledge. And so I'll tap into my good friend and colleague, Greg Nordstrom, often. We'll get Ben Knoll on from time to time, and we will discuss the different maps and the models and what we can expect for any of these big-time storms. This is a good friend of yours. It should be anyway. The National Weather Service homepage. You get the idea of what's going on from the watches and warnings. Kind of calm out west, generally foggy and settled. The air is generally settled, right? It's not very stormy out there. And that's because that big ridge of high pressure is generally dominating the west. Low pressure generally in the east with that trough carved out. And then you got the low pressure with that northwest flow coming across the lakes. So you got winter storm warnings here for areas like Cleveland and downwind from there, Canton, and even all the way down into parts of the Appalachians. And that'll continue on. If you live up there, you know all about this. This is fairly typical. Nothing too unusual. Even some lake effect possibilities in Watertown and down not far from the Tug Hill Plateau region, but more of a winter weather advisory. Just some light snow as you see up there coming out of the Buffalo Weather Office. And you can see the radar here. Look at all these nice tools. Low pressure just kind of rotating around up here. And those westerly winds to west-northwest winds. Yep, dumping some lake effect snow. The lakes are still warm. And it's that time of year. But we'll be watching for those really big ones that are going to put 30, 40, 50 inches across those regions. And that's the kind of stuff that I'll be heading up there to document, to put some of our cameras out to catch those. And look at that. You can just literally see the low pressure area rotating over this region. Kind of neat. I like it. I mean, winter weather, hurricanes, whatever. It's all interesting to me. So this is the map that we'll be looking at often from the lower 48 perspective. Here's our current situation with the low sitting up here in upstate New York and Vermont, New Hampshire region. The flow around that, of course, counterclockwise. Southerly flow up here, rain offshore, of course. And then that northwest flow on the backside gives you all that snow banking up against the Appalachians. And if we put this into motion for the next several days, that storm system moves out. Another storm system starts to take shape over the next 3 days or so. And you can see even in this map, there's a little bit of upper level energy right here. And then it tries to spawn this surface low, so some rain showers. Kind of coolish conditions, though. It's not like it's summertime rain. Maybe a few thunderstorms, though. Moving ahead towards the weekend, some wet snow, maybe for the Appalachians. And then this storm tries to really ramp up. But not a lot of cold air. We're not draining in this tremendous Arctic cold air to get involved with this system just yet. It's still early December. That's out to December the 6th. But it could be windy and maybe some beach erosion out there. A pseudo nor'easter. I mean, look, the pressure there off the Cape, 984, 5 days out. That's getting it. Some snow on the backside. Looks like Jack Sillen up there in Maine could have some snow in the latter part of the weekend. And then look at this, December 7th. Let me single out this map. With the exception of a few lake effect squalls coming off of Michigan, Lake Michigan, and a few of them coming in here, that's it. No precipitation anywhere else. There's Washington, Oregon, kind of outline the lower 48 here. That is pretty cool. I mean, dude, no precipitation to speak of, just some instability, lake effect driven snow, possibly on Monday, December 7th. Wouldn't that be cool if that's what this was all about? A very, very calm day. Also, we're going to look at Europe from time to time. We've got a lot of followers over in Europe. Keep our eyes out for any big storms over there. Putting this into motion for the next several days. Yeah, weak low pressure rotating around parts of the Mediterranean through Italy. And then a big old sprawling storm system around the UK with rain and snow, depending on where you're located, goes into France and Germany. But, you know, typical over there, no major news-making, like exceptionally extraordinary events. And they do name their storms over there, the different entities, the UK Met Office. In the United States, the only winter storm names are done so by the Weather Channel. And it's a commercial marketing thing, and I think it's okay because it draws attention to them. And if you have your opinions to the contrary, that's fine. They do it over in the UK, and in Europe, they name these storms officially. Winter storms, any kind of big storm, they call them like Storm Norman or Storm Brandy or whoever. I'm just making it up. And in the United States, the Weather Channel, of course, they say Winter Storm, Jack or whatever. And maybe one day the Weather Service will adopt that policy for significant winter weather. Whatever, I don't care. It's just a good way to draw awareness to the situation, and we will be watching our friends in Europe to see what happens. Look at that. That is a huge cyclonic storm system there. It takes up a good deal of northwest Europe, doesn't it? Something to keep an eye on. And lastly, realizing that we've got more fans than I realized down in Australia. It's going to be summer down there, right? Going into meteorological summer in the southern hemisphere. Got to keep an eye on Australia, not just for the potential for cyclones and maybe the sparse chance of wet weather, because it, after all, is going into their summer season, but also for wildfire issues. That could be a big problem as their summer gets going and things heat up down there, quite literally. All right? So there you go. Kind of lengthy today, but that gives you a good overview of what we're going to be discussing in the off season. We do have the Patreon still going strong. In fact, the new podcast season of Stories from the Hurricane Highway going to drop tomorrow with season 2, episode 1. That's an audio podcast. We're going to go and look back at the year 2005, the makings of a mega season. You can join up on Patreon, support this whole project as little as $1 a month. And you can stick around during all winter, see how we grow things. And I mean, we're just going forward from here, folks. There's no limit to what we can do with the power of crowdfunding behind us. So I appreciate all of that support. Follow on Twitter and Facebook. The brand is HurricaneTrack. you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button so we can get more people involved with this. It's a neat thing. The weather brings us together. It's something that we can all kind of become a part of and interact with each other with. And I love it. I love having you guys watch from your side of the screen as always. All right, have a great rest of your Tuesday. Stay safe out there, all right? I really need you back because without you, there's no reason for me to do this. I am Mark Setheth, Hurricane Track in the off season. I'll be back with more for you next Monday.